When most men meet a woman, they think the fastest way to get close is to start digging into her history. They ask about her childhood, her ex-boyfriends, her heartbreaks. They believe those questions create honesty, but the truth is, questions like that rarely uncover reality. They only uncover the version of her past she's comfortable sharing. A person's real past isn't told, it's shown. It leaks out in the pauses between words, in the way someone reacts when plans shift, in how they handle attention, in the way they describe other people. You don't need to interrogate a woman to understand her story. You only need to watch closely enough to catch the things she doesn't realize she's revealing. That's the difference between chasing answers and living with clarity, because if you know how to observe, you'll see whether she's healed, whether she's carrying scars, or whether she's still trapped in battles you had nothing to do with. In this video, I'm going to break down how to read those silent signals, how to interpret them with calm detachment, and how to protect yourself from stepping into a past that isn't yours to carry. 1. Her relationship with attention. One of the simplest ways to understand a woman's emotional history is to notice how she handles attention, especially from men. I'm not talking about whether she looks good in a dress or posts selfies on Instagram. I'm talking about the energy behind it. Does she light up every time someone compliments her, as if being seen is a rare gift? Or does she carry herself with quiet confidence, accepting attention but not relying on it? Pay attention to how she moves through a room, how she responds when she becomes the center of focus, or how often she mentions the attention she gets from other men. Here's why this matters. Women who grew up feeling invisible, whether in childhood or in past relationships, sometimes learn to measure their worth by how many eyes are on them. It's not about vanity, it's about survival. They crave validation the way someone craves oxygen, and often they don't even realize it. There's nothing wrong with enjoying admiration, but needing admiration to feel whole, that's a warning sign, because when that spotlight fades, or when you stop being the one to provide it, she may unconsciously start searching for it elsewhere, not out of malice, but out of habit. So don't just ask yourself what she does to get attention. Ask why she needs it. That answer will tell you more about her past than any story she could recite. 2. How she talks about other women. If you really want to peek into a woman's emotional world, don't just listen to how she talks to you. Listen to how she talks about other women. Those offhand comments about friends, co-workers, or even strangers say more than she realizes. Does she celebrate other women's wins? Or does every compliment come with a subtle sting of sarcasm? Does she describe her friends with warmth, or are they always toxic, fake, or drama? The way she frames other women is often a reflection of what she's lived through herself. A woman who was betrayed by a friend may carry suspicion into every new friendship. One who constantly criticizes other women for being flirty may still be haunted by the sting of infidelity. When she says, "I just don't get along with women," that's rarely independence. It's usually an old wound dressed up as strength. Here's the truth. When someone is at peace with themselves, they tend to be at peace with others. If she treats every woman as competition, it's worth asking what past experience made life feel like a battlefield. So don't focus on the gossip, focus on the pattern, because in those patterns, her history is speaking out loud, whether she knows it or not. 3. Conflict style. If you really want to understand someone's past, don't just watch how they act when everything is smooth. Watch how they respond when tension shows up. Conflict, even in small doses, has a way of dragging old wounds to the surface. It doesn't have to be a shouting match. Sometimes it's as simple as a cancelled plan, a forgotten text, or a moment where she feels unheard. What happens next is the real clue. Does she shut down and go quiet, as if speaking up would only make things worse? Does she explode, turning small issues into guilt trips? Or does she stay grounded, address the problem calmly and move on? These reactions aren't random. They're echoes of what she's been through. A woman who learned that vulnerability wasn't safe may default to silence. One who was betrayed may go on the attack to protect herself before anyone else can hurt her again. And a woman who grew up in a steady, secure environment is more likely to approach conflict as something to solve, not something to fear. When you see how she reacts in friction, you're not just seeing her in the moment, you're seeing the survival strategies she's carried with her for years. The question isn't, can you fix them? The question is, are you prepared to live with them? Because conflict doesn't invent new behaviors, it reveals the old ones. 4. Relationship timeline. Without asking directly. Most men think the only way to figure out a woman's relationship history is to ask her directly, when was your last boyfriend? Or how long were you together? But questions like that usually invite a polished, edited story, the safe version she's comfortable telling. The real timeline is hidden in the details she drops without realizing. Listen closely when she talks about places, routines, or old habits. If she says, I used to go to that cafe all the time, we loved it there, that casual we is a breadcrumb. She might not name the person, but the past just slipped through. Notice also how she measures time. A woman who naturally says, that was 2 years ago, is giving you context without being asked. Another who avoids dates entirely or skips over whole periods of her life may still be carrying something unresolved. The key is subtle observation. Her words, her silences, even the way she changes topics are all part of her story. She might not tell you the chapter titles, but she'll give you the outline. If you're patient enough to hear what isn't being said, because when someone has healed, they can usually talk about the past without flinching, but when they haven't, the gaps in their story are often louder than the words themselves. 5. Her views on men in general. One of the clearest windows into a woman's past isn't how she talks about you, it's how she talks about men as a whole. Pay attention to the way she describes her exes, her male friends, or even strangers. Is her tone playful, balanced, maybe even respectful? Or is there a sharp edge, a bitterness that slips through no matter who she's talking about? When she jokes, men are all the same. It might sound casual, but if that line keeps showing up with a sting behind it, it's not a joke, it's a scar. No woman suddenly decides that men can't be trusted. That belief usually comes from experience, being lied to, cheated on, or let down. And here's the catch, even if she's laughing with you now, those old beliefs don't disappear overnight. They shape how she reacts when things get difficult. Maybe she gets suspicious when you're quiet. Maybe she assumes you'll leave before you ever considered it. This isn't about judging her, it's about clarity. If her worldview is colored by distrust, that lens will eventually be pointed at you. And if she hasn't learned to separate you from them, you'll end up carrying the weight of every man who hurt her before. The way she talks about men isn't just conversation, it's a trust map. And if you can read it, you'll know whether she's ready for something real or still fighting battles you didn't start. 6. How she talks about her family. If you want to understand how a woman builds emotional bonds, listen to how she speaks about her family, especially her parents. You don't need to push for deep confessions. Her tone alone will tell you more than you think. Does she light up when she mentions her childhood? Or does her voice flatten, brushing it off with a quick, "It was fine, whatever"? That whatever often hides more weight than the words themselves. Indifference isn't always real. It's sometimes the mask of old disappointment. A woman's relationship with her father, in particular, often sets the blueprint for how she views men, trust, and safety. If she had to earn affection, she may carry that same need to prove herself in relationships. If love was unpredictable, warm one day, cold the next, she may expect that same instability from you. On the flip side, a woman raised in an environment of consistency and care usually reflects that same steadiness in how she communicates and resolves conflict. Her family dynamic is like the silent operating system behind her behavior. It doesn't scream for attention, but it runs everything in the background. Pay attention to the small clues, how she talks about holidays, how she recalls her mom, whether she rolls her eyes at family time or cherishes it. Because people rarely grow out of the emotional language they were raised with. If you want to know how she'll love you, start by noticing how she learned to love at home. 7. What makes her emotional and what doesn't. If you really want to glimpse the past she carries, watch what stirs her emotions, and just as importantly, what doesn't. Reactions are like fingerprints. They reveal where she's been, what she's faced, and what she's still holding on to. Maybe she suddenly goes quiet during a movie scene about betrayal. Maybe she skips a song about heartbreak every time it comes on. Or maybe it's the opposite. She seems completely numb when others would normally feel something. Those moments aren't random, they're echoes of old wounds. A strong emotional reaction usually means, "This happened to me once, and I haven't forgotten." On the other hand, emotional detachment can signal scars so deep that shutting down became her survival strategy. If she brushes off your vulnerability or dismisses someone else's pain, it might not be coldness. It might be armor she built long ago. The point is this: people don't overreact without history, and they don't underreact without reason. Her triggers and her blind spots are maps pointing back to experiences you weren't there for. And the more you notice them, the clearer the picture becomes. So don't just watch for tears, watch for silence, watch for avoidance, watch for what shakes her and what doesn't. That contrast often tells you more about her past than words ever could. 8. Observation over interrogation. The biggest mistake most men make is thinking answers come from asking harder questions. They grill a woman about her past, hoping she'll open up like a book. But the truth is, the more you interrogate, the more polished the story becomes. Observation is far more powerful than interrogation. Anyone can ask, "What happened in your last relationship?" and get the safe version. But the man who pays attention doesn't need to ask. He already sees the answer. He notices the way she flinches when plans are cancelled. He hears the shift in her tone when trust comes up. He watches how she reacts to being praised for something deeper than her looks. These are the moments when the truth leaks out, not through confession, but through behavior. And the man who trains himself to notice, to stay calm, to connect dots quietly, he becomes the one who sees the real woman, not the mask she presents to the world. Observation isn't cold, it isn't manipulative, it's awareness, it's emotional intelligence. It's the difference between falling for a performance and truly understanding the person in front of you. Because words can be rehearsed, but patterns can't be hidden. If you've made it this far, you're already ahead of most men. Because you now understand that discovering a woman's past isn't about interrogation, it's about awareness. It's not in the stories she tells, but in the patterns she repeats. Her relationship with attention, the way she talks about other women, how she handles conflict, her views on men, her family, her triggers. All of these are windows into where she's been and who she's become. The question isn't whether she has a past. Everyone does. The real question is whether her past is healed, or if it's still shaping her present in ways that will affect you. And that's the clarity observation gives you, the ability to see not just what she says, but who she is. When you stop chasing words and start noticing actions, you stop wasting time on highlight reels. You protect your peace, you raise your standards, and you put yourself in a position to choose wisely instead of being swept away by appearances. This is the practice of Stoicism in relationships. Calm observation, steady judgment, and the discipline to act on what you see, not just what you're told. If this opened your eyes, let me know in the comments which part hit hardest. And if you want to go even deeper into the psychology, the patterns, and the emotional truths most men miss, make sure you subscribe, because this is just the beginning. Keep your eyes open, keep your standards high, and most of all, protect your peace.